Hello, you're almost welcome for this week. This is our last panel. I am Leonardo Gross. I'm very happy to be here with you, moderating this panel with so many stars. But before I would like to tell you, um, please write your comments and questions to this panel, and then our speakers will answer at the end of the session. Our agenda today is how to create new leaderships for the ESG era. And we know that the pandemic has drastically affected many societies and the economy and has caused major business disruption in supply chains, many gaps, and it sharpened inequality. And it has generated a new sense of urgency for fairer policies. Now, governments, companies, investors, civil society, we're all requiring more responsibility to avoid the challenges that arise from it. We also know that ESG commitments have become kind of an acronym of how business show their responsibility to society, and you see an increasingly larger avalanche of partners and players more and more interested in companies, and investors also want to know whether companies are delivering their ESG promises. And as ESG becomes a decisive factor in a capital's market, the ESG performance will be the driving factor for reputation and assessment of companies. So there are many studies showing that companies that manage well ESG have a superior financial impact. So with this brief introduction, I'm going to give the floor to our guest speakers. The first is the great Edvaldo Vieira from Amil, an executive with long experience in finance, operations, financial planning, and he has a degree in business administration, specializing in participating or sitting in boards. Thank you very much, Edvaldo, for being here with us. Our second guest speaker, speaking straight from Switzerland, Vanessa Cordaro, Human Resources Director for Europe. She's also the global leader of inclusion and diversity of AstraZeneca HR team. Currently, Vanessa is based in Switzerland. She's a lawyer, specialization in transformation of business leadership from MIT. Thank you very much, Vanessa, for being with us. I know it's late for you, but we are sure that whatever you have to say to us will be very important in this panel. And then last but not least, we have Fernando Antunes, government relations leader of Salesforce Brazil. He's part of the global team of government affairs. So he has been supporting public-private policies focusing on diversity and inclusion encompassing Latin America as a whole. He also represents Salesforce in multilateral organizations, advocacy groups, and also commercial associations. Welcome, Fernando. Thank you, Leonardo. Good evening to everyone. Now let's talk a little bit about the dynamics and how the session is going to be. So each one of you has 10 minutes for them to introduce themselves, talk about what they do, their companies, and their relationship with the ESG, and your vision of how do you see the challenge of the new economy looking to ESG, environment, governance, social impact. And then we are going to move on with our panel, so do not fail to send your questions so that it can be answered at the end of the presentation. So Edvaldo is going to be first. Please, Edvaldo, tell us, you have taken on the command of the company with many mergers, competitions, major challenges. So just tell us, what is your role as the main leader, the role of Amil? I would really like to hear you on your mission and on the challenges of the new economy, especially with regards to ESG. Good evening. Good evening, Vanessa, Fernando. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I believe that these talks have two objectives. One is learning and to invite more people to be engaged in addressing this theme. I am Edvaldo Vieira, and I'm wearing glasses And behind me, you can see a red and white picture on a white picture. I have taken on Amil 6 months ago, and when talk about ESG, Amil is part of the United Healthcare Group. There are 20,000 people in Latin America, 40,000 people with 26 billion BRL revenues per year. So we during the, were important leaders during the pandemic when we talk about here and now, and we really had to focus on ESG pillars during the pandemic. When we talk about ESG, this is a theme that exists since 2004, and it was created by the World Bank, by and UN, with the top 50 top financial um, organizations. And then in 2020, the top 20 companies, it's something that you have heard about. Sometimes people think it's just marketing, but there is an alignment between best practices and the best results of companies. And this is one of the main points. Now, when we look at the term, and when I talk about Amil and United Health Group, it's the largest health group in the world. So we talk very much, and we have all our hospitals that are 15 hospitals plus 53 clinics. So we play an important environmental role, starting from waste generated in hospitals and all the care that we need to take in handling waste. This is something very important, something we look at in terms of environment and try to evolve when we look at think of social. So social starts inside home, taking good care of your employees. And we've been doing a lot, especially in terms of mental health, how to relieve it, give orientation, bring it to discussion, and also to society at the same time. And in 2018, so the topic of health became very important, and with the pandemic, this became even more important. Now, looking into social, we have an inclusion and diversity program that is very important. This is a journey. We are not yet where we would like to be, but we started it in 2018 in a more organized way, and we've been evolving. And during the pandemic, we have exercised our values and initiatives even further, when donating more than 45 million to society, to hospitals, masks, beds. When we talk about governance, we have important governance, many different committees that we have, ethics, compliance. And so they help us dealing with governance. So this is the organizational role. And I always like to say that for all these aspects related to ESG, we play a role as human beings and participants of society, and we can start at home. This awareness is very important. So first of all, and summarizing all themes in one presentation, this is all I would like to say, and the word is back to you. Excellent, Edvaldo. Very valuable insights. Now I would like to hear Vanessa. Vanessa, please tell us a little bit about the role you play in AstraZeneca in the new context. We would like to hear your vision of how you understand this challenge, the human resources challenge in the new economy, looking at these issues. What is AstraZeneca's positioning in this agenda too? So thank you very much. Good evening and good afternoon. Now, in talking a little bit about my education, I am a lawyer. I have been working at AstraZeneca for 20 years. My entire career was at AstraZeneca for 20 years as a lawyer. And then 5 years ago, I started working in HR. And then in the middle of the pandemic, I moved with my family to Switzerland to take on this position. And these have been important changes. And in talking about ESG, I would like to say uh, and mention three different perspectives, maybe the individual, the teams, and part of the teams and the perspective of the organization. And then we can talk a little bit about the role of AstraZeneca. And as Edvaldo said, I understand that all of this starts with whatever acronym you want to use right now, but it has been growing. And my role as a lawyer, there are laws in Brazil addressing this theme for quite a while. And then we changed the way we talk about it, but this has been really a core theme. About individuals, I think it's important to talk about it, especially because it's impossible to transform organizations unless we have our own self-knowledge, especially with regards to our vulnerability. All of this is very new to all of us. And I think that this is an important reflection when we think of the organizational issue and also as a career. How do I position myself as an individual that needs to continue learning? It's no longer the situation when you put yourselves, well, I already know it, I am a leader. No, we are all together here learning. And then one individual issue or topic, and even my own personal experience of my moving from Brazil to Switzerland. So when I talk about ESG, especially the environmental issue and how we treat the environment, and here what I have learned with the environment and how much I had to learn from zero and different things. One basic example is how we treat waste, and each one is responsible for your own waste and the way you deal with it. And in Brazil, we see it differently. So I think there is my individual learning and a reflection to all of us in terms of how keeping this reflection of the learning journey. And also from the social and personal standpoint, when we think of people and your own self-knowledge, how do you know yourself and observe others? My vision in Brazil was one, and coming here, I am seen as diversity too, coming from Brazil, a different country. There is also a learning for people in how to use and how to bring behavioral issues into the arena. This is as a self-reflection, and also uh, overall issues and how this impacts you as a leader, and how you can help other people and you can learn and help other people to understand this moment. As to the organization and talking about AstraZeneca globally AstraZeneca has a very strong strategy, understanding its role as an organization. Currently, companies play a key role to develop the cultures and society as a whole. So this awareness is very important. AstraZeneca is ahead of this. And today we have a people strategy. And as HR, we may also contribute for leadership and how we may also contribute to society. So there are strategies for the issue related to the environment, carbon, and the entire strategy related to that, and also a strong role in terms of the inclusion, diversity, and in understanding that diversity uh, of employees reflects the diversity that we have with the people who relate to, with suppliers, customers. So this reflects society, and we need to work towards that. And then there is a clear thing about that. So we should address the three phases, and self-reflection is very important on this learning journey.
Thank you, Vanessa. it's also good to hear about the impact that you are generating globally. It really makes us believe that all the actions required for success are there. Now, Fernando, the only one who does not represent a health company, which is wonderful because it really helps us bring best practice from other areas. He has knowledge, and please tell us about Salesforce, your opinion, how you are dealing with the challenge of new economy, thinking about all of that. Thank you, Leo. Thank you, everyone. I'm Fernando Antunes. I am a white man. I'm wearing a white shirt, and there is a predominantly green picture behind me. Yes, actually, I'm not from healthcare, just an outsider. But being a B2B company, we provide services to technology, to healthcare company. I have been through 3 different governments. I used to be a civil servant. Since the beginning of the year, I've been the leader of governmental relations here for Brazil, Salesforce Brazil, but with a different kind of understanding. So we have institutional representation, not only for the government, but also for third sector and publicly owned company. Salesforce started in 1999 in California. It's been in Brazil for nearly 7 years, but our first report of ESG dates from 2012. So we've been dealing with that for a while. Predominantly in this challenge of the world economy, our founder and CEO, Mark Benner, calls it stakeholders capitalism. Translating that into ESG, we cannot have ESG in silos. We always need partners, companies, third sector, government, multilateral organizations, competitors, suppliers. We have to work together in such important topics for Brazil. Diversity, inequality, inclusion. We have a number of challenges that we can fight together. At Salesforce, we try to just walk the talk. One of our values is equality, not only with the important milestone of having equal salaries for men and women that has been heralded by our CEO, and as Vanessa has said, always giving an opportunity for our staff to keep on learning inclusive language, for example. 100% of our staff in the world have been trained on how to interview people, mitigating intrinsic biases to our cultures, accepting to look to diversity and acknowledge it. Let me also speak outside the company. We need partnerships. And Salesforce, in our partnership capitalism, has been focusing on sustainability. Mark Bainion in the World Forum created 1 trillion trees, which is a completely separated NGO between companies and the government, who tries to plant 1 trillion trees by 2030. Nevertheless, today, on April 20th, the Earth Day, we brought together the Earth Coalition with government US, Norway, UK, and a number of companies adopting the challenge, the individual challenge of not only being a company with zero greenhouse gas emissions, which is a reality since 2018, but also generating 10 million carbon credit for the next 5 years. We believe that we will only be able to do it if we invest in companies, private initiative, and also bringing on board the government, especially in Brazil because of the Amazon. We strongly believe that we can have governing affair projects for Latin America. We've done that with Argentina called CPAC. We hired and supported a survey to assess the situation of women in Latin America in science and innovation, analyzing not only inequalities, what we would expect, but also ways, public-private pilots, through which we can find inequality and understand that women can be in science, in technology, leading large companies. And I would like to invite Amil and AstraZeneca to embrace this new initiative. On top of all of that, at Salesforce, we have an ESG model, and we would like to invite other companies. And we have a separated NGO, which is publicly traded at NASDAQ, applied 1%. It replicates to 12,000 companies this model. And the model is the following: 1% of our equity, 1% of our working hours of all staff from all over the world, and we donate 1% of our products to causes that we believe in. It's incredible because all staff members are volunteers in causes that they believe, and they end up mobilizing companies, creating this fantastic synergy. We have groups of equality. We have the Both Force for racial issues, Women's Network for Women. We have Workforce for Sustainability, Outforce for LGBTQA+. And all these groups, which are internally engaged, promote actions within and outside Salesforce with their hours of volunteer work accounted for. And by doing that, we really believe we can change the community. We participate in the UN Global Pact, the largest organization of companies. There is one chapter for Brazil we've just joined, and I really enjoyed it. It's amazing. Companies join the pact, and there are different committees. I think there are 12 committees. Concerning the SDG, we want to act on human rights, sustainability, and communication, promoting this 1% model of donation. And with the committees, with different other companies, we can definitely impact our country and the whole world. Well, to wrap up, education is also equally important. We are a very well-known CRM platform. And why don't we focus that for a more inclusive look? We have a tier-head platform of education open to everyone to know what CRM is and how to deal with Salesforce and a number of other topics. There was one first class with Center Paula Souza, which is the owner of ETEC and CETEC technical schools and vocational level schools here in São Paulo. We trained 600 teachers, and these are young people that they might not know what a CRM is, and they can be qualified to use Salesforce. I still cannot give you a spoiler, but we are going to share that with media. How many of them are part of, have already got a job? I really like to have projects where we invite others to participate, to get on board with us. Well, thank you, Fernando. It really gives us a cross-industry perspective to our panel. Let's go into our Q&A session now. Even though ESG existed before the pandemic. Of course, the scale and the severity of the global crisis has really somewhat forced this adoption of a new perspective. The expectation that companies are intentionally carrying out their business for sustainable development and for a positive change. As ESG becomes more central to corporate identity and how companies are involving and engaging partners, we really have to understand what has been driving changes and how can we navigate through ESG really progression. So Edvaldo, ESG, is it a passing trend? Is it a fad, or is it here to stay? This is not to healthcare only, all sectors. Everyone is focused on it. It lasts 1-2 years and then it vanishes and we just go into a hot trend new topic. Is ESG just a fad, or is it here to stay? And what's the role of leadership to maintain that? That's a constant discussion as well. I think that it's here to stay for one specific reason. There is the motivation of not only profitability. It started in 2004 with the UN document and who cares when. So it was something in 2004, but still hasn't gained more muscles, and now it's getting more and more importance because of the pandemic. Now we see that it should be an effective concern, and this is really the best support for things to really come into reality, regardless of what the society needs. And the society has been asking for companies which are more conscious, more aware. I think that the importance of the society, the importance of really having companies aware of that, plus the capitalist incentive is really making sure that this is not a fad, really. But of course, this is a journey and we are going to see it evolving as we move on. But I don't think it's a passing or a fashion that's going, something that's going to go out of fashion. Vanessa, how can we know that? Because companies that resisted to have an ESG framework are finally accepting the pressure of consumers, shareholders, boards, and regulators, and now they are trying to keep up or to catch up for lost time. Now, first line organizations are adopting ESG in part because they strongly believe in the financial benefits of incorporating sustainability in their investment strategies. But you have this global understanding. We can see a request for ESG leaders, a need for talents. What can we expect? What's the archetype? What are the skills required for an ESG leader such as this, in your opinion? Leadership will be defined in connection with the purpose of the organization. We should not generalize things or standardize what is expected or not from companies, because then we would be running the risk of attracting talents to the organization which wouldn't have the right profile, just bringing them on board just because they have to, because it's fashionable. No, we really have to understand the purpose of the organization, in what areas we have to focus on, because not all companies will succeed in all areas. They should start transparently focusing on one specific area, what are the required talents, because it's a marathon, really. It's not something that can happen overnight. Leadership has to start understanding there is a journey of education of what it represents to us and to our organization, clearly define the model of leadership and the kind of investment that's going to be made for it to happen. What is the governance that we are going to have for things not to simply disappear eventually? And leadership is important. Of course, performance of an organization is important. Technical issues are non-disputable. But how can we set criteria for ESG? We need talents who have this openness to learn, a constant pursuit for learning more, someone who is willing to make mistakes and realize his or her own mistake and anyone else's mistake, because if it's innovation, we are going to make mistakes. And also considering the impact of innovation, bringing people who have this new mindset of growth, who are willing to run risks, to test, to know that there is not ready-made recipes. So this is the model of leadership to be pursued. But please be careful. You have to think about what kind of leadership you need for the organization you have, depending on its level of development.
I really agree with you, Vanessa. We're always growing. This is permanent growth. Fernando, let's talk a little bit about the public sector, something that is fundamental for our ESG equation. How do you see this approach between what companies are doing and also this need for public policies, especially in this world where there is so much political polarization as we have today? How can we create this drive to have the right policies and in terms of right good policies? Well, thank you. And just continuing what Vanessa said about continuing education and also ESG and learning, I'm going to quote Paulo Freire that he says, the world is not, the world is being. And then on not just technologically speaking, but also socially and environmentally speaking. Well, actually, I'm kind of biased in talking about the government. It's impossible, as I was a civil servant before. It's important to talk about impact. It's impossible without talking about size. So the group of companies can do something that is slightly more significant. Now, if we operate with the government, the impact is much bigger, is national, global. I see more and more to design public policies. The governments have been resorting much more to companies to understand where synergies are and where we can work together, can be something educational, technological in terms of knowledge support or financial support. But we've been seeing since the G20, as a few weeks ago now at Glasgow, where they have COP. So a very rich and profitable interaction between companies and governments. I could never imagine the minister launching a program of green growth or Biden Green New Deal. thinking of the world and what it is going to be like in the future without thinking about the service industry, the manufacturing industry, where people are employed, and how these products will be complied with the ambitions of the government and vice versa. I think that we need to um, avoid the logic that the government just regulates and charges and companies do. I think that we should have a novel mode of interaction. I think this will last. And in this ever changing world, this is always going to be an issue that they are changing as reparation for inequalities we accumulate for many years in the global history of capitalism, but how we as a society decide in unison what we want to do from now on. Very good. Well, Fernando, I really enjoyed what you said. This is very much related to everything you said, this thing of learning. And somehow this is a continuing process. It's a long-term thing. Now I'm going to give the floor to Edvaldo, and I set aside the worst questions for you. You said that ESG is here to stay. How do you see, for example, how can we differentiate what really is a path to maturity in ESG in comparison to what we call greenwashing? So those of you who are not familiar, it's just a greenwash. It's just the facade, just the face of it. How do you, in your experience, see signs or indications of greenwashing in talking to leaders all over the world? And unfortunately, this is the problem. And then you talk about sustainability, diversity, but actually it's not internalized in businesses or in contracts. So this type of washing gets attention. How can we assign more transparency and separate different things from the companies that practice greenwashing from those who are for real? Well, I thought because I know you, you were going to ask me the easiest questions. Well, I think that greenwashing, it's also part of the journey. Today, our world is much more connected, and as society, when they charge and look, they look to within the companies. So awareness building, um, there is a risk in your saying that you do something and your team knowing that you don't do it. Well, that's not good. People will know the negative impact then afterwards. If this is known, is much worse than the potential benefit that it might cause. Uh, there's the famous case of a car dealer that said, well, I'm not polluting, and then they were out. Uh, and then people discovered. So things can be very easily checked in today's world. And then this is something natural, something that happens. And today there is some awareness. It's not about doing that. When someone does that and there's a negative impact that is so intense, and no one is going to run the risk. So this is much easier. So I am here and I am going to evolve in that direction. So sometimes there are facts and depends on where you want to go. Coming across problems in the way and greenwashing, this is a big problem, and the impact is really overwhelming. And then it's not worth the risk. It's easier to show the evolution in the journey than having a dream that is not true, that is a lie. So it's not worth doing that. Excellent. So uh, uh, I know that you would answer the question in a very classy way. Well, Vanessa, let's talk about diversity and evolution. This is a very important agenda. This is one very, very important aspect in ESG. I think this is top priority for big companies such as AstraZeneca. And what can you tell about inclusion of diversity? And this is well done today. What are the actions that are expected in the near future? Tell us a little bit about what you've been experimenting with a broader vision. And then you have the Brazil and the world. So tell us which practical actions you have been implementing and how you're dealing with it now and in the future. Well, thank you for the question. At AstraZeneca, it's important to say that there is a diversity and inclusion board that is led by the organization CEO, that are representatives from every department. But then again, so the organization has defined that inclusion and diversity is a priority. And maybe the trajectory and how it started, I think that very much in terms of the beginning. In the beginning, it was very much related to gender, assuring that there is gender equality and equity, especially in leadership levels, and how to prepare that, and having the based on data, and always defining progress and evolution. And then in the beginning for AstraZeneca. And then it evolved. And then this journey, as I say, is very much related to us doing what is right, and this is related to ethical issues, governance issues, and also what was required from organizations. And we have evolved to other types of groups of affinity, giving space for and empowering people so that they could create their own affinity groups, and so that they could understand a little bit of the context of the organization and could contribute to the evolution in the organization. And then there is another step which I find important, which regards diversity related to innovation, growth through innovation, and how much diversity and inclusion are directly related to that, to the expansion of the business, to understand better your consumer, understanding better your population, and bringing a little bit the issue of the healthcare, pharmaceutical industries as a whole, and how you bring the issue of diversity, not just into your own staff um, internally, but how the world and design of the world at some point was designed for white men. So, how can we design the world for other people? So, thinking of clinical trials in the area of health, and how to design many different things. So, this is totally related to diversity and inclusion and to the issue of innovation. So, how to use the groups that have been built internally and give voice to those groups, and how this is also related to creating an environment that is psychologically safe for people to feel confident to speak up their minds, to express their problems openly. This is related to psychological security, and this plays a key role. It's useless to create groups or silence them or not give space for them to speak. And I think that this is the moment of the organization. And I think the evolution is very much related to that, very much being able to identify the population that is diverse, creating an inclusive environment, providing psychological safety, not just in terms of doing what is right, but also using that for innovation, for growth and expansion of organizations. And then, as Fabio said, how that is connected to other organizations and to government organizations, and this has a much bigger impact. The difference that I currently see between Brazil and other countries, and in a country where I currently work, this is very much related to privilege and understanding the self reflection of our privilege and how we can intentionally make things happen. And I see that today and here and in Brazil too, that is advancing to, but this intentional leadership for us to evolve more rapidly. I think that we are on the right track, but we can accelerate it much more. Excellent points. And so we need to accelerate our panel too. We are about to end. We are getting close to the final part of our conversation, and I would like to ask the three of you very briefly. So ESG is going to be part of every executive and the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity of the 21st century. Major learning that we have is to have sustainability integrated to the strategy of the companies. This is going to be the biggest catalyzer to provide financial return, both in the mid and the long term. Of course, this is going to automatically improve, and it is to create this database of best practices in to teach and inspire others to do the same. How can we as leaders drive the ESG agenda to go faster and further? How can we create ESG leaderships? Vanessa, please. So I think that creating leaders, the main point, once again, is to define what I need for leadership. And then creating a system that will make it possible for me first to prepare who's recruiting, to identify who those people are. So whenever I have a training on interviews, how can I have an interview? Not to be limited to the technical issues, to bring ESG issues to recruiting. So someone recruiting me as a leader need to observe during the entire process. And then when talent comes to the organization, how we can retain the talent in the organization. Another super important thing, if I comply with my practices, I will be able to attract and retain the talent. And how we can create. And there's a change because different people are at different moments. Some people feel threatened by the change. Other people want to do it. So how we identify agents of change who are passionate about it and might influence others and bring other people on board. So understanding the different types of leadership and diversity. And so it's not just talent and leaders who are super excited. So we need everyone. It's like mobilizing and bringing and making the transformation with everyone. So the role of leadership is to have the skill of mobilizing and transforming. Excellent. Fernando, how can we accelerate the ESG agenda? Your closing remarks, please.
As you have a work means with different, you have to continuously learn and have all voices, not only leaders addressing that and being open to talk about the different organizations, but I strongly believe that we have to create areas which are focused on it, to be kind of ombudsman, to avoid not only greenwash, but also to internalize this mechanism of transformation. So there is a institutional transformation, mean of values, positions of large leaders, of great leaders, but provided that they are open to listen to all the voices of the staff. Great, Fernando. Edvaldo, can you please close with your touch? How do I create new leaders in this new ESG era? First thing is we have to lead by role model, walk the talk. Secondly, as Vanessa mentioned, that we have to have a purpose. We have to do things with an intention. It's okay, you can work on awareness of leaders. It's important to speak about that and to educate that, lead by example, role model. We always plan things ahead, really have it as a business, what I want to reach, what are the main actions, and include KPIs. And we can always rely on a variable compensation, right? But that's not only common sense, because fine, stealing is not right, but well, maybe it was still. So what is it? You have to have an action, you plan, you monitor, and you really follow up results. I think with that, you can really motivate people. I believe in that model so that we can really raise the bar. When you do it, you have in itself really a will of action. It's no use talking about diversity if you just select people from top universities, right? So once you have a KPI and a goal, you can see the end to end and make decisions with intention for things to happen. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful and a great learning to be here with you. Thank you very much. Time flies, amazing. So now, Vanessa, now you can go to bed. I think it was wonderful. I've learned so much from you. Thank you very much for Iniciativa FIS. Thanks, Rodrigo, Josier, Vilar, for the invitation. Thanks, Edvaldo, Vanessa, Fernando. You were amazing. If you want to carry on talking to them, just access them at the social media. Thank you very much. Have a nice night. Thank you.